So I'm going to resume the recording and call this meeting to order and remind all of us who are present that the meeting is recorded and it is later shown on public access TV here in town, channel 191, I think. So we should all remember that as we're participating here, that we're being recorded. And by being on the meeting like this, you agree to this reality, that you're being recorded. Even if you have your camera off, the audio, your presence is felt. Okay. And so with that, we have our open time for the public, and we do have a guest. I don't know if he's willing to identify himself, but we do have a guest. And I just wonder if there's anyone else besides the guest that's evident that has any input. Okay. And our guest, who's welcome to listen in and see how we operate. Who knows, potentially a member. We'll see. Guest, it's up to you if you want to identify yourself here.
Chester Papineau.
All right. Chester Papineau is a resident of Southampton and someone who's interested in the functioning of the housing authority. So we're going to let him take a peek and see how we operate. Chester, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Jim.
Is anyone else getting an echo or just me?
I mean, we hear your echo. I'm not sure. Chester wasn't echoing, so.
You're not echoing either. Just Jim.
Yeah, just Jim. So something at your house, Jim.
Is that any better?
Keep talking.
Yeah, I moved the mic
better.
a little bit closer. Okay. Good. All right. Well, then we will move on to our agenda items, which is the approval of the previous minutes. If folks had a chance to look at those.
Yep.
Do I need to retrieve them for any changes?
I would move to approve as is.
A second to that, please.
Second.
All in favor with a voice vote, please.
Simmons, aye.
Jane, aye.
Sini, aye. Well, look at that. It's unanimous. Wonderful. Okay. Now we're going to move to ongoing business where we have special guest star Ken Comia of PVPC, who is going to present what he's done so far with our housing production plan. Ken, are you willing to, can you share your screen and show it that way? You have the ability as a visitor or a guest.
I think
If you give them permission.
yes, I do have permission.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Then I would ask you, sir, to proceed.
Sure. Let's see. So what you received this afternoon is a initial draft based on what will be in the final, document to you. I think one of the things that I am still working on is the appendix and putting everything into the appendix, which is there's a fact sheet that literally crosses off and answers questions. Let me quickly, I think I have that open. Yes, this. So appendix, do you see this, Appendix A?
Yes.
So there is something that you have to submit to Dhcd, which is how you comply with the housing production plan criteria. And there are a couple of criteria. And this is narrative. This is in your 2011 update, but it's going to exist as an appendix. And also in the appendix will be the materials from the community meetings, as well as some affordable housing terms that we throw in there for the purposes of talking affordable housing with your community, as well as applicants, and as you examine housing trust funds and some of those particular items. I'll share this with you once I formalize it within an appendix section. Presumably the appendix section will just be linked to the actual document, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm finalizing this appendix.
Ken, could I ask you to zoom in a little bit? Because this
Sure.
is, you know, I don't know if anybody else can read what you have on the screen. Thank you.
Sure. So as I mentioned, there are a couple of things that are required under the housing production plan. You know, this seems like a year ago, which it has been, to talk about the components that are required in a DHCD approved housing plan. And so we talk about the housing needs assessment, talking about population characteristics and housing supply characteristics, talking about constraints, opportunities and challenges, and having a section with regards to that. And then the actual plan that's talking about goals and the strategies that the town can employ to get there. So this is just, I'm just quickly briefing you. Obviously, you will have comments. In my email to Janet, getting on the agenda, I did provide some dates. Hopefully we can discuss that, you know, where I can come back after you've had a chance to review this and the appendix section to go through additional comments and the work through of the document. There's an executive summary section that I included here, which spells out some of the issues that have been identified during data analysis and community meetings, and then a summary of the goals and the identified strategies that we have kind of been talking about, and which were used in the community meeting, and had some commentary regarding that. So there's this, and these are actually spelled out within the chapter 4, which is the actual plan. The next section is the introduction. This is basically talking about how Southampton fits into this conversation of housing, and then kind of the technical terms of what Chapter 40B is and housing production plans, and spelling that out, talking about how you did this in 2011, but also at the same time talking about how you have a master plan and how that integrates in there, as well as the discussions that were taken away from the master plan update. As you'll see, there's some formatting that probably that we'll address, but I just wanted to get this out to you so that you could start looking at it. And then talking about the planning process that we employed for this, committee meetings over Zoom, community forums, those dates, data sources that, you know, where we took some of this data from, coming from the census, American Community Survey, and then also looking at the documents that were consulted within the planning documents of the town. I actually will be including the hazard mitigation plan because I did utilize some components of that. And then talking about Chapter 2, which is the housing needs assessment, community overview, and then the characteristics of population that comes from the census, American Community Survey. As I said, I think at the community meeting in November, the census data, there's very limited data that has come out that is at Southampton level. And really the only ones are the housing units and population at the level. And they haven't been broken down by race. And you'll see that this particular race section of the population was supported by American Community Survey 5-year estimates, and this is the 2019 data.
So Ken, just a quick question. Is it okay to ask a question along the way?
Sure, why not?
So I guess I'm just kind of surprised that one of the population areas wasn't Hispanic. So does that mean that it just rolls into, because it's not other race, which would be 0%. So that's not accurate.
Can we add an ethnicity section since the government counts those separately?
Yeah, So what I'll do, and I didn't put it on here, but there is an ethnicity section, as Sierra said, where it's non-Hispanic, white, and then it lists the race, and then Hispanic, and then lists the race. So I'll just include, a small box with that data. However, I don't think it's gonna not necessarily gonna change any of the population numbers. That Southampton is mostly white.
Right.
And
I just know if I'm Hispanic and I'm not even listed, I guess I just,
that makes sense. I will include that box and figure out a way if maybe it can be incorporated into this, or it just exists as a separate table.
Okay. Thank you.
Population.
Right, I agree with Jen. I just gonna say the adding the ethnicity, so the Latinx population is
Sure.
recognized as important.
Talk about age. We talk about household type, and have a breakdown with this data. Again, all of these are from 2019 American Community Survey, and these particular sections are just typical in a housing production plan when you talk about the population that you're planning for and that you're addressing.
And the breakdown is usually 65 and older. Is that how it's typically?
Yeah, that's how it's presented within the American Community Survey.
Okay. I hear you.
And because what I can probably do, and in the appendix, what I will do is include those PowerPoints. I know that when we did the master plan exercise, we did do a collection of data based on data that was provided by the town clerk's office, as well as for the survey data. We collected, I think we went up to 75 plus. So we added a 10-year cohort at the end of 65. So, but the way that American Community Survey and the census interact with the senior population, the older population is 65 years. Education, again, just presentation of the data based on the most recent data that's available. Labor force, talking about how that labor force works within the context of the housing production plan. I think both in the purpose, and I think as you'll see, there's a little bit of narrative in how you address economic development, especially with COVID. I think that there is a conversation to be had. Hopefully that's captured within this document. But if you think that maybe some of at the arrival of some of the points that I was trying to make with regards to the data, or with regards to the some analysis that was presented in the community meeting, I think that we try to weave closely to as if COVID didn't exist. However, you have to address COVID because it changed everything, and so we do try to do that. We talk about disability as a population within that we're planning for with regards to this housing production plan. We, as remember from either the housing survey or the survey that we did for the master plan, or even from the discussions within the community meeting, there was a presentation of the population that identifies as disabled, and it's important to note that because there's housing that needs to you need to plan for housing for that population as well, and there are strategies to do that, and so that that's why we capture this particular data. We talk about income. Obviously, this is probably the biggest. Because this is the measurement of which subsidized housing is provided to the community, or how the community identifies and identifies the need for subsidized housing, is through income data. And so The data is presented as such, and this comes from the American Community Survey. And we talk about a little bit about cost burden, which in Southampton, the data suggests that it's not necessarily the case that there's a cost burden population. However, there's a little bit, and just to be mindful of that. What kind of strategies exist? That's important to at least put out there as things for the housing authority or for the town to explore when you're talking about those and that make under 80% of the annual median income. Jim.
So can I just, I have first of all, welcome Joy. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. A chicken and egg kind of question. When you talk about cost burden and the 30%, isn't it fair to say that a community, may have a low percentage of population that's cost burdened because they're not in town because they can't afford to be in town, those who are potentially cost burdened?
Yeah, I think the ability to buy in Southampton, I think you captured that correctly. And I think obviously, I know that when we had the planning board members on this call, there was a discussion of who is this document for? What is it for the current residents? Is it for future residents? How do you market affordable housing? Is it for current residents, or are you trying to get people from outside the community to come? And I think, the way we at least present it is based on what the snapshot of the data is collected. I think we can weave in a conversation about opportunities within the strategies to help, look for, to provide housing for those outside that currently live outside of Southampton because they can't afford it currently. So I think we do address it through the strategies. With regards to some other data that's presented, the housing supply, talking about housing units, ownership numbers. This is the thing that I'm curious about, because this is the way that is presented at the community survey, American Community Survey, that there are no vacancies in town. I don't know. This is
in 2019.
In 2019, according to this American Community Survey. So I don't know, if there is any qualitative kind of discussion or qualitative, observation that because you obviously live there, if you're hearing, or if this seems to, jive with these numbers, or at least a portion. Anyone?
So when they say vacancies or vacant, just clarify, vacant apartments,
Vacant in
owner
general.
occupied, just.
So it's out of the 22,406 housing units in Southampton, it says that all of them are occupied.
Yeah,
Now,
that's not true.
What's that?
Sarah?
Sorry, hi. I was running late and now my internet at the house isn't working, so I'm on my phone. Sorry for being late. My neighbor across the street, we're actually been talking with the town. The house has been vacant for about 18 months or so, almost 2 years. And that's just one. They just happen to be across the street. But I know that I know there are at least 1 or 2 vacant homes in town.
So what I think I'll do here is provide the, because this is like glaring. It's like a big, you see 0 on the screen and you're like, wait, does that mean all the housing units are occupied? It doesn't mean that, because obviously through Sarah's description, that's the case. And there's housing that's on the market, whether or not they're there for a long time. Obviously, that's another thing. But what I think I'll do is also include what is it? The error. I can't. It's the term for margin of error.
Yeah.
And include that within.
Plus or minus. So this is not apartments in apartment buildings or that we have it doesn't, this just is houses, right?
This is all units, so it's inclusive of housing, houses and apartments. However, that number is defined by the census. But in this case, it is housing units. So there is the number of owner occupied and renter occupied. So I guess we presume that, the renter occupied are the apartments within the town.
Or some of the houses are rented.
Or some of the houses that happen to be, in a rental.
Right.
Mechanism.
Just to clarify, Ken, because the heading says owner occupancy ratios as opposed to all. Nonetheless, I agree with Sarah. There's got to be some empty units, but it does, to me, speak to the fact that there's probably not many compared to surrounding towns. It's a high demand town. If that's what this graph is demonstrating, in that.
Well,
line.
I do think that, and you can also discuss how the town has been growing like a lot over the past 30 years, and is the fastest growing community in the Pioneer Valley since the last census. So I think it does attest to that. But I think because this is just a weird data point and the way that it's presented, include a little sentence or two about the margin of error, but also change the title of the chart and then also draw in the fact that it's possible, or that and then also draw the relationship between the growing of the town and, this means that people are moving to Southampton.
So, only change the title if the title's wrong. If it truly is only owner occupancy ratios, then.
I think to Jim's point, it suggests that they're occupied versus vacant. And of those occupied, some happen to be owner, some happen to be renter.
No, this says owner, but.
Yeah, this says owner. And so, if I were, just to make it clearer, maybe just like occupancy ratios.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Green.
So doing that.
Those other apartment complexes.
Yeah.
Right. I think what you're saying, Janet, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is we just want to confirm that it is all units. Yeah. And if we know, if we know that's true, then yes, the title needs to be changed. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also within this particular section is the age of housing. There's a little blurb about some of the challenges of older housing stock. We also talk about in the housing plan section how to address some of that, and how it has been done in Southampton in the past through, a small chunk of CDBG funds that had seemed to be available to the town at some point. And then talking about housing structure types, and then affordable housing inventory, which is the why you do these plans, to talk about how you increase that number, and talking about, what exists in town currently. And then some of the other rental assistance programs, Section 8, the housing voucher, and just a description of that. And then we talk about the constraints. Obviously, you present the data as it exists, then you talk about the constraints. And the constraints are cost, obviously. This data comes from whatever has been available to that. We talk about the single family home market. Obviously, the majority of your housing in Southampton is single family homes. Talking about median sale prices in comparison to Hampshire County and Massachusetts. Monthly homeowner costs, all this comes from the American Community Survey. Building permits from, this comes from HUD. And it's just talking about, what's the building activity like in Southampton. It's just a presentation of that. And then we talk about, yeah, Jim.
Sorry. Just clarification. I'm sorry if you said this already, Ken, but this American Community Survey, is that the survey that we receive annually? Like my family just filled out a sense, like a survey, or is this a separate survey?
I think some households do receive annual survey, but I know that, obviously this is not as, I'm not going to say official, but like the census number obviously will supersede all of this data once that comes out, because there'll be actual numbers that the census.
So this is not a census taken by the town.
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, this number, I guess, some certain data sets, yes. But most of the data sets are coming from the American Community Survey or from whatever government entity, like building permits in Southampton. The reason why I use the HUD numbers is because, when you talk about area median income and HUD developments and the money's coming from the federal government, they utilize those numbers. So,
and at the end of this production plan is the American Community Survey, referenced, and there's a link, or just if people have questions?
I'll be consistent with the way that it's presented within the document. Under most of the sources or most of the data sets, it does suggest the source. How I got there, I don't know if there's a direct link, but at the same time, if you were to go to the census website, you would be able to find this data.
Okay.
We can at least, I can probably also include like the official set title. But I think the links are not necessarily corresponding.
I'm just anticipating questions people might have. That's
Sure.
all. So thank you.
So Ken, my question also is, if we're really close, and I know you don't have the answer to getting the census data, do we just pause until that census data comes out, or do we move forward and then if a month later the census data comes out? Is there?
Well, what can happen is you call PVPC and say, can we update our housing production plan? And, it's not going to take me. Presumably it would be me. But it's something that you literally can just input a new table and maybe address some of the narrative. It's not going to change too much. But I think just to move forward so that DHCD can review this and certify it and approve it, just so that the town has one, just like you have your open space plan.
Yeah.
Under constraints, limitations, development constraints, talk about some of the environmental issues. And again, slopes, protected lands, soils, stormwater and erosion control, talking about how that can be an impediment or a detriment to developing housing. However, also trying to weave in this conversation that the town has updated these plans, the community plans, and has had conversations about where development should be occurring in the first place. You passed a new wetlands bylaw, and just noting that. So if the state were to come and saying, why can't you develop in these certain places? And this is why. You have certain environmental constraints as well as regulations that the town has passed.
And what about aquifer? Is that listed in here? Because so much of our town is on the aquifer. Does that restrict it in any way?
If it's not, I can definitely include it within the conversation. I don't know if I do. I'll take a look.
Thank you.
Might be a good idea. I think Janet's got a point.
Well, no, and that's been ingrained in my head with regards to when we talk about development in Southampton is the aquifer and how do you address it? And when we were talking about the open space plan, you know, coming up with the opportunity to address all development in the aquifer and what are your criteria for those developments? Yeah, I don't think I mean, maybe just even a sentence or two on how to figure out how to incorporate that. That makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I had to look up alluvial deposits, Ken. That was nice. So.
I still have this
You want to
map.
share with us, Jim? You want to share?
So it's sandy-like soils. Let's see here. I've got too many screens open at once. Here we go. Alluvial. Loose clay, silt, sand, or gravel that has been deposited by running water.
There you go.
Thank you.
So also included is looking at your zoning and just putting, you know, on paper what your current zoning is, particularly how housing is addressed within zoning, you know, and how it addresses certain housing issues or certain housing components and regulations for cluster development, accessory apartments, multifamily dwellings, and common drive development. Because presumably if you have those addressed in your plan, that suggests, you know, that you do have, you're not necessarily over-regulating the ability to develop additional housing in town. So, you know, I think, you know, you're familiar with what your current zoning allows with regards to these housing elements. And we do address that as a strategy to look at zoning for certain aspects of it to make some clarifications within that. The master plan, talking about priorities that were completed.
Yeah, can I ask one more question? And I can raise my hand because Jim's so good at that, but elderly housing. So that's just a craw on my side. What is elderly housing?
Well, your zoning bylaw has.
Is that how we define it? We say elderly housing?
Yeah, it's there in your zoning bylaw, you have a whole section called elderly housing, and it allows certain. Go ahead, Janet.
Is that an age thing? I mean, is it defined? Sarah, do you?
No, it's more housing types. And Sarah, if you have, you know, a clearer explanation, I'm trying to pull up.
Right. Is it about accessibility or?
And we can always come back because I know we're going to meet again.
Well, and the thing is, you know, you have it specifically within your use regulation. So, you know, when you look at a zoning bylaw, you have your chart of the districts, the way that is presented here, and that's an actual use.
Right.
But we can clarify.
Right.
And it's a use that's identified within town. Because obviously there had to be a special set of regulations that were passed by town meeting to allow for this use to be allowed with a permit in those particular districts. And what I do, because I have another community in my head, and they also use the term elderly housing, but it's specific to the housing types that are allowed. And it's mostly like more dense development.
I can look it up too.
So we present that within the zoning section, the master plan, talking about how the master plan incorporates housing issues. We're listing what the goals are in the housing section of the master plan, and then talking about what has been done with regards to those priorities that were set. Infrastructure conditions, talking about things that we already know about wastewater, town water, and some of those challenges that exist. And then also talking because housing and density usually has a related transportation component, also talking about transportation and how, that can be addressed. And then now comes the housing action plan, which, as I mentioned at one of the previous meetings on how to incorporate this, because the town is not necessarily identifying any new strategies and goals, because, our SHI is the same as it was in 2011. So the thing is, obviously, you're using this document to market the strategies that you're going to continue with the community, but also identify now in this plan on the steps to move forward.
Our SHI must have changed slightly because we've had group homes purchased or built in town since 2011. So they qualify as state, right?
If they were correctly documented, I guess. Since 2011, I mean, what the current inventory says is that, and this was pulled in the middle of last year, was 40 units at Southampton Meadows, right? I'm mixing it up. Southampton Meadows, not Southbridge Meadows, and 4 group homes, and those were established within that inventory list. So if there are some additional group homes, we're gonna try to figure that out, I guess. And if Janet, if you are aware of any,
I just know, 2 were built in like the last 2 years, I think. So, or maybe more than that. So I don't know where the other ones were in 2011.
so if anything, we'll have this plan reflect that there has been some development of group homes that presumably are included in a subsidized housing inventory, and the steps for the town to take are to ensure that your subsidized housing inventory includes those in a future iteration, or you'll work towards that.
I think
that's good to know.
I think it's good to be mindful too that the denominator keeps moving also as more houses, the inventory increases. If anything,
Yeah,
our
your number's
SHI
gonna go down too,
Exactly.
because the 2020 census will show that you do have more, so your percentage will go down.
Exactly.
And I'm just looking at the south, there's a number 44. That's
Right.
not the percentage, that's the pure number. That's the number that
That's a pure number, right?
That's true.
And according to the 2010 census, you need to go up to 201 to meet 10% of affordable housing. So 201 units should be in your inventory to be, to meet the 10% affordable housing per the state statute. And we talk about, in addition to the goals that have been identified, the affordable housing goal, which is the concrete number and the way you arrive at that. And it does provide some, narrative here with regards to what the 40B section says and what the regulations for a housing production plan are. If you can present, an annual rate of housing development, annual rate of housing development, then you'd still be compliant or compliant with your housing production plan. We talk about potential funding sources. I didn't include ARPA in here. And I don't know if the town is talking about housing. I know that with regards to ARPA funds, because there are some communities that have been identifying ARPA as a funding source for housing related projects.
I don't remember seeing in the survey. I'm trying to remember if it pointed out affordable housing. We have so many other issues.
Yeah, no, and the thread is so small, like it's so narrow, and if the town, is employing a certain way that it's looking at these funds, more than likely, If it's a more narrow view, they're going to do infrastructure projects, or PPE, and or talking about back pay to essential workers. And, those are just some of the categories. But some of the larger communities receiving more money have used ARPA to acquire buildings. Is that something that's going to be talked about? I don't know. But we talk about community preservation because that is something that you can use monies towards affordable housing, historic tax credits for some of your older buildings, community development block grant funding. Again, and talking to the CDBG folks in our office, I think it's 2013 was the last time, about 2009. But there was some funding that was provided to the town for some housing maintenance in the past 10 years. So it's not likely, but it exists, and it has happened in the past because of your area median income and you don't have any environmental justice communities in the town that you probably wouldn't be meeting some of those numbers. And, it's the listing of some of these other acronyms that are important to those that if you're meeting with developers, they're going to know to go to these sources to get their monies to help develop. And then you did receive the Housing Choice Small Town Grant Program for capital projects. So that's something that, you've identified as a source of funds. So that's something that you can look at again. And then talking about who's important for this, and this kind of spells out, the important people that will be responsible for implementing the plan. And then your regional resources, and then the strategies, which again are 12 that we identified that still fall under outreach and partnership and support, programmatic and identification of suitable properties, and then regulatory actions, which are specific to zoning changes. We spell out some of those here, and we've talked about this before. And then going into each strategy basically is who's going to undertake the action, what types of funding, and then the action steps. And that's the way that each of those are presented. And that's just, the plan. So like I said, in addition to this, there's going to be an appendix with those items that I identified in the beginning, which is the language for compliance with the affordable housing production plan criteria and affordable housing terms, and also some of the documents from the community meeting, the PowerPoint, Jam boards, some of those important things just to ensure that we're showing to the state that there was a community process. But yeah, you will review this, and I'm sure you'll flag some items that will be helpful to get this to a point where we'll do a community review, post this on the website, add additional comments, but at the same time, I'll send this off to the state for their initial review and go from there. Yeah, Janet, I see your hand.
So, yeah, two quick things. One, really just a minor thing, but I only saw it once, but the term Board of Selectmen should not be in there. Okay. So just be cautious of that. And were we going to include any town-owned property to review? I thought that was somewhere in the other.
Oh, what I did, I know that you have been talking about, you provided me, Janet, the items that were.
Yeah, there's not a lot. I mean, so.
So I did put it in this, and I'm going to share the screen here. This document. in the appendix, which is the identification of municipally owned or housing authority owned parcels. The identification of them. I guess if there's a conversation, a further conversation, other than identifying, if you as an authority have been talking about certain numbers of these parcels or even private parcels, you can let me know and I can incorporate that into the plan. But sometimes what is given to the state is an inventory of those parcels with also a discussion on, it's probable that the housing authority would be looking at these parcels that have been identified that are town owned, and see what the appetite of development for housing is. But I don't know, I guess I leave it to the authority if there is, if there are certain parcels that, and you'll see this and you'll see the way that it's presented, if there are certain parcels that you want to ensure are documented for the specificity of housing. And if you've had any other discussion with regards to those, and you can include that into the narrative.
Okay.
So it's both an identification of the town-owned parcels without much lip service, other than if the authority has talked about certain parcels, we can bold those and we can talk about your conversations on that. But I know that you've talked to affordable housing trust funds, and at least at the meeting, it was clear too that at those community meetings that there was some discussion about real estate, and there was obviously people that wanted to develop in town and were vocal about some of the regulations and some of the regulatory constraints that they had to develop. But if after you review this, if there are identified parcels that you want to include that either need to be bolded or fleshed out more, let me know and I'll put that into this.
And you'll send us, that's part of what you'll send us before we meet again.
Yeah, that's the appendix.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll include everything else in the appendix.
Well done. Well done.
Well,
Folks have questions?
we're 75% of the way there.
Yeah. Additional questions for Ken?
I did learn, and I don't know if the town, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I did learn that Southampton put in a DLTA request for a district local technical assistance request for some bylaw work, and I believe it was granted. So
The inclusionary bylaw, right?
it's the multifamily
Oh, I thought it was an inclusionary.
inclusionary. Yeah,
Maybe I could be wrong. I wasn't-
one of them. I know it was
that
housing
planning
related.
board. Sarah, maybe.
I can pull it up. Paul Demon wrote it.
Yeah, I don't know if we got a copy or not.
We want to review all of the zoning bylaws, not just one of them.
We are reviewing all of them. It's more just additional time for reviews that'll take longer and need more real rework.
Right. But there were at our meeting, our joint meeting with the planning board, and I guess this could wait till, this is actually on the agenda later, so maybe we should wait to talk about it. But there were definitely more than one bylaw that we wanted to go deeper into.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like I said,
So
I'll have to pull up
It's
exactly.
good it's on the agenda so we can identify
With
that.
Sarah's here. Let's share it.
Yeah. Will you be staying with us, Sarah,
Yeah.
through the agenda? Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, Ken, I again, thank you. It's got a great start, in my opinion. Looks really good. Dare I say, even sexy. So nice beginning to our HPP.
So Ken, your other dates were like the 9th and the 10th of this week, which is kind of quick to review.
Yeah, I
right?
wouldn't do that. That was in case I couldn't meet today.
Oh, okay.
I think But I think, knowing, I don't know, Sarah, if is this week a planning board meeting week?
We actually have an impromptu one on Wednesday to go through some things.
Do you have one because the next one I'm available is on the 16th. So if that's available for the group.
We do have a planning board meeting on the 16th.
Okay.
Which starts at 7, Sarah, is that?
Yeah.
So and Sarah, is the planning board meeting at town hall now or?
This week we're meeting Zoom, but we have been meeting at town hall. And I think the 16th will be in person. I mean, it's only 5 minutes for me down the street, though. It's not.
Yeah, it looks like first floor meeting rooms, Sarah.
So if we wanted to do an hour on the 16th, I'm also available for an hour on the 17th, which is Thursday at like the 6 o'clock time.
Yeah, I'm not available on the 17th, but I could do an hour on the 16th if Sarah wants to have a night of meetings.
I mean, I could jump on from 6 to 6:30 and then hop off either way.
Yeah, I guess if the committee wants to meet, then again, I'll turn around this appendix, and then you can provide comments as they come, and then on the 16th we can figure out what the next steps are from there. But we can discuss the overall document, and your comments that you would bring.
Does that work for folks?
What was the time?
6 to 7.
6 to 7 on February 16th?
Yeah.
Right.
We need to have a vote on that, or I don't think so. Just setting a time. Six to 7 on the 16th. Going once, going twice.
I say yes.
Yes,
I'll give an aye or a yay.
I think we do it. Okay, excellent. That is a quick turnaround, Ken.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you're the ones that are going to be coming up with the comments, and I'll be turning around the appendix, within the next 2 days. So you'll have a more full document by then. So, if there are changes, I can address them as I can. But the 16th, I think, is also used for additional time because now you'll have had time to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll figure out what happens next if we schedule another meeting for the following week or 2 weeks.
So you captured any of my comments tonight, though, Ken, so that
Yeah, I wrote them down.
I don't have to remember them for a week or anything. Please. No, I mean, I wrote them down, obviously.
All right. Well, thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it. Taking the time to give us that hearty overview.
Yeah, I'll stick around for until 7.
As long as you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right. With that, I'm going to move on. Next is targeted membership for the Housing Authority. Again, just want to reiterate my welcome to Mr. Chester Papineau, who's our guest tonight, who's observing us, and he's still with us, which means we didn't scare him yet. So that's good.
And he did submit an application to be a volunteer on our board, unless we scare him away. I'm hoping they can maybe, recommend him tomorrow at the select board. Is there select board tomorrow? Or is that at one of the next ones so we can have him join us?
Yeah,
Now-
Go ahead, Sierra.
Did you, I was just going to ask nextly, did you two, Jim and Janet, were going to look over the list for the next targeting of people? Did you have a chance to do that?
I thought I highlighted some things. in
You
my
did.
order of choice a while ago, right
I
after.
did also.
Okay.
So it should already be on there.
Did you highlight it, Sierra?
No, I haven't been in there yet. So I will go in and I'll pick another, I don't know, 25 people and prep the things.
Was Chester on the list that we sent out?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
It's okay.
That's a pretty good return.
Yeah, we'll take that. So I didn't find many, to tell you the truth. But I don't know as many people in town, apparently, because I'm looking at these names and I'm looking at occupations, and I focused on, and maybe I shouldn't, but there's a lot of people on there that are retired, and I wish I knew more of them as far as their interests and availability. You don't want to send it to everyone.
I know I had a couple people I need to reach out to from the last meeting that I haven't been able to touch base with, so I will continue with that as well.
Okay. So I'm sorry, we jumped a little bit, but Joy, when is the next select board meeting?
We have a meeting tomorrow, but it's just executive session.
Okay.
So the next meeting after that will be the 15th.
Okay, so if we have anyone who's, we have an application from one person willing to join, they have to be presented to the select board. Is that correct for nomination? Is that how that works?
I think that they're just waiting for us to, to meet Chester first, because I know, Jim, you knew him, and I think everybody wanted to give an opportunity to experience this board, and I think they're just waiting for your nod to go ahead and process the volunteer application.
Mm-hmm. Well, then
tonight. So
if it's all right with you, Chester, you can either decide now, or I can call you later to confirm, and then we can go from there.
Okay, we'll talk. One other thing, Jim. I live on White Loaf Road, and less than a mile from me, there's 2 new housing units down there. One is unoccupied.
Hmm.
So, and they're very small units too. I mean, they're not, big houses, but they're the kind of houses I would think that people would be looking for young people,
Wow.
those the ones near Strong? Are they the ones near Strong?
Yeah,
White
I
Loaf?
bet.
One sold and there's one
Yeah.
still open. Last I knew, every time I go by, it's still got the sign on there.
I think those are for sale by owner, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Well, briefly, Chester, what we're learning on this board is, even although smaller is certainly leans toward the lower price end of the continuum, even smaller homes in this town right now with this market are very expensive.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I
But
can
none-
only speak of the experience I know about Bobcat Holler. All right. And these houses started out with just a gas line of electricity when I got here.
Hmm.
And they went from, high 300s to 500 real quickly when they're getting resold.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we will continue, Sierra, if you would, take a look at the newest. I use a different highlight color or whatever, and we can continue pursuing this as we brainstorm different either skills or population demographics or whatever to target. But I think you've got a few more. I'm just saying, I don't know if you have another 25. That's all.
That's fine. I'm just going to pick some additional random retired people, just on the understanding that retired people are probably not working a full-time job and might have more time to dedicate to volunteering. And I think it's fine if we just sort of pick some of them and just sort of what we've been doing, or what we did the last time, which is just send a few, see how their turn goes, and then keep going if we don't get enough people.
Sure. In addition to the additional ones that Janet and I highlighted.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I think this is going to be a standing agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along. Sierra, an update on the affordable housing units that are currently being proposed in town. Do you have any new information from those gentlemen?
Yes. So I reached out to be like, what's going on? We haven't heard from you in a bit. And they said, as of 5 days ago, we're still working on a viable plan. Our research since the last meeting with your committee reveals that the property is in MADEP's Zone 2, which restricts our options for sewage disposal. This Friday, which was last Friday, we plan to meet with a contractor who will provide us with projected infrastructure costs, including those for a central septic system. Once we have these, we'll be able to present more concrete information to you in the committee. I'll update you again as soon as possible after our meeting.
So MADP, just for clarification, I'm assuming that's Mass Department of like DEP, Environmental Protection. So these are not local zoning restrictions. This is environmental protection. Okay.
Statewide, yeah.
Yeah, because down the bottom of that slope is the Manhan River. I don't know if that contributes to this, what they're talking about. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember where I heard this, but, and it's probably third-hand information, so I can't guarantee accuracy, but someone had mentioned to me they were possibly looking at a 55 and over community. Because of that, they realized they couldn't do and the number of houses that they wanted to do. So I have no idea the accuracy of that. I didn't hear that from them, but a third party said that.
Okay.
Yeah. The world of speculation.
Yep.
I don't know how that would make a difference. There's still so many toilets and so many showers, but okay. All right. So I appreciate, we all appreciate, Sarah, you staying in touch with those folks. I hope they understand that we're here to collaborate in any way we can to make this happen.
Yeah.
Good. Status on CPC funding, Sarah, just where we're at.
So it turns out CPA funding cannot be used for this. I just heard from Cindy. So they were instead pursuing the Dlta funding so they could have PVPC help instead, probably can. But now I'm mildly concerned because I think we had substantial edits to the inclusionary zoning bylaw and the multifamily. Inclusionary zoning was the most complicated that we definitely wanted to make substantial changes to. But if I remember correctly, the other two we also wanted to. Is that true?
I can screen share and show you guys the DLTA grant application. The wording is
Please.
Somewhat open, but let me see if I can.
Okay. It's certainly the inclusionary one that needs the most work.
Yeah.
Can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
So the description here, edit existing bylaw and change requirements for multifamily homes, condominiums, condos, accessory apartments, change land requirements in certain zoning districts and lot sizes. Southampton master plan requires planning board and housing authority to exercise these changes. Bylaw would complement DLTA 2021 study. That's what we've been reviewing tonight. And then develop criteria for creation of the Southampton Housing Partnership Trust. So the inclusionary does not seem specifically referenced in here.
Good. Okay.
It's unfortunate. I hope that, Ken, do you happen to know how much wiggle room we have in these applications? Can we still work on that?
We can still work on it. I think, what'll end up happening is more than likely there'll be some sort of joint meeting. That's how I would imagine it. And, Paul and Jim can figure out when that happens. But we can talk through the various changes that we'll be looking at. And if the inclusionary zoning is, of utmost concern, which I think we've identified that's a good chunk that we want to review, then we'll do that. But I also think that, we can figure out how to incorporate some of these other, topics of housing and what those recommendations may look like. So there is wiggle room. There definitely is. I don't know how much money was allocated to this, and I don't know how much time, a staff person would have to work on this, but, I think I would already be coming in with the knowledge of how to interact with the changes that you'd want to look at.
So the statement of purpose states the inclusionary bylaw.
That's what I just noticed as well.
Yeah.
Janet. So,
Yes.
The description doesn't even mention the inclusionary bylaw.
yeah,
Okay.
but-
Right.
Well, I think it sounds like, the language used to secure the funding doesn't have to be necessarily word for word exactly what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, no, and sometimes what ends up happening when I talk with to the communities, where they may have had some confusion in the way they presented the discussion, not too out of the box, but we were able to navigate, the things that we would actually be doing, and we provide a scope, and we'll work off that.
Awesome.
And that's something, as we get into that, Ken, I assume you and Richard could, talk about how he's reformatting the other
Oh,
section.
of course. Yeah, and more than likely, that would be how I would, present, or how we would work on presenting those changes, is to incorporate into whatever new document you're looking to adopt, or whatever those bylaws are currently formatting to, how you're looking at formatting them.
Okay, sounds good.
Sarah, is this in lieu of Richard doing something, or is this in addition to what he's focusing on?
This is kind of so part of the issue is just the amount of money we have allocated for these updates. So because this is kind of a significant update, we're looking to get additional funding. So we'll have to determine exactly if we have some reformatting codification of these bylaws. Maybe it makes sense for Richard not to spend his time on the inclusionary and multifamily if they're going to be looked at by PVPC. But Ken, will it be you doing this?
I'm assuming so, but at the same time, I think we're also hiring a housing planner, because there's a lot of housing work in the region. But more than likely, it'll be me.
Right. I guess my only point was we should talk about it as soon as possible so that there's not duplication of efforts or
Oh,
reformatting.
for sure. And I think as soon as I understand how much money is being funded towards that, as well as soon as I have something to charge to for that work, we can definitely have that conversation. And I always can, call Richard offline and just kind of see where you guys are.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just what you're saying, divide and conquer, essentially, Sarah, is what the approach is to getting these bylaws updated. If we can get patchwork, some consultant help, that'll make most sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Richard will probably do the final combination formatting, make sure it's all one cohesive document, just so it's all the same, really.
Right. Makes sense. And it looks like you're okay with that, Ken, is Richard being kind of like the primary on this, and Dlta being this.
I would have, because you have a consultant already working on the bylaw, this really is an additional step of identifying within your housing bylaw how it looks. But then Richard would be responsible for incorporating and formatting, what that would look like when it's taken to town meeting, or, however that's discussed.
Great. Okay. I think we covered your updates, Sierra. Thank you. I'm hearing a little bit of that echo again. Sorry, folks. And timing's poor because I'm next. Report on open space presentation. So my apologies for the echo, but I'll try to just, drive through this. So I presented at the open space committee meeting, and without a lot of elaboration, I just basically shared that there's a potential for synergies between expanding affordable housing and more, housing price points on the continuum would fit, like starter homes and finisher homes, and that there's a crossing over with that and open space. And that's because sometimes especially when you have donors who donate land in town, some of the land they donate is along a roadway and has frontage. And and I never forget when they had that a few years back at the Congregational Church when the Kestrel Fund came in and presented, and they talked about that quite a bit, that people who've donated in the past have been able to carve out a piece of land that was their ancestral home and keep it, or actually donate pieces along the road for projects like this. So it's not unheard of. It's pretty common when people donate land. So I felt open space was, I think it was a new concept for them, so it took them a little while to wrap their heads around it. There was some hesitancy because it on the surface, it may seem contrary to donating land for open space, not for housing. But again, I reiterated that this is not a new concept and that it's been replicated and completed in many parts right in our local region. And we're not talking about when someone donates land for open space that we're going to have a huge affordable housing development in that open space. That's not open space. We're talking about targeting maybe small sections of any donated land for open space for housing, generally along the roadway. And I use an example, a classic. If you travel East Street in Easthampton, there's a nice little duplex over there that was built by Habitat right along the roadway, and it just fits in with the neighborhood. And that would be the kind of thing I encourage open space to consider as land is being donated, and to consider having us as a housing authority work with them to talk to the donors if they had any questions, etc. So I can't speak for them. I think overall they were receptive to hearing this and would consider further collaborations, but I think it's something that we should reiterate to open space now and then, that we're here and we're very interested in collaborating with them on any future donations to see if there's an interest in the part of the donor to carve out a piece for affordable housing. Folks have any questions? Or I guess in summary, you could say the seed has been planted. Let's hope it grows in good soil. Questions? Okay, next on the agenda is housing trust creation and joy, because this is one of those things where and certainly as a housing authority we want to support and be part of that, but I don't know if it's strange or not, but it's just not what you intuitively think, a housing trust, but it's really under the purview of the select board. And so I'm looking, Joy, for if you have any updates as far as a housing trust creation.
I don't have any updates per se, besides they're a lot of work. So I've been looking into them, obviously. And I found like a workbook to work through, but it's like beyond just like one person kind of doing it. Next steps would be discussing, I know you guys are saying housing authority can't be on the board, and I understand that, but then I've seen in different places that members of housing authority can be on the board of trustees. That's correct? Okay.
It's not that we can't be on it, it's just that we don't have to be on it.
Yeah, you guys, that you can be on it. Like members of planning board can be on it, select board, et cetera, et cetera. So
It's however it's defined, initially who makes it up initially, and because when trustees get appointed, they're certainly not appointed by the housing authority, right? So.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just coming up with like the chicken or the egg, like what comes first, like figuring out who's going to be the trustees and coming up with a vision statement, or working on a vision statement of who we want the trustees to be, and then reaching out and asking them to be on it. So I'll talk more with select board and specifically with the chair about how she wants to proceed. Maybe just do an outline of a mission statement with with who we would want to be on the board, somewhat like we've done with the ad hoc, different committees and whatnot, and take it from there. So just designing a skeletal something with who will be on the board and the mission of creating affordable housing, and then just have edits and bring it up to select board and have discussion there and get the ball rolling there. Does everyone think that's a good next step?
I think so. I see Sierra has her hand up. So.
First of all, I just wanted to bring up, what was that Massachusetts
MHP.
MHP? I just wanted to, I don't know, Joy, if you've connected with them, but they were
I
like
did.
going to be helpful throughout the whole process.
Yeah, I did connect with them. I've been meaning to send an email just because I don't know if they had like a timeline for when they would get back about applications, if they've been awarded or not. But I did mail them an application, and we did get a letter of support from our former representative, Lindsay Sabadosa, and our current representative, Kelly Pease, with the application. So I have hope. But I will reach out to them and ask them, because I mean, that was the whole point of that application, was to help us guide us through the housing trust. So I would love any kind of help from them.
Would it be helpful to put together a working group like this one of select board and housing peeps that want to champion this, or is it too early for that?
Right. I think we're willing to help. It's just not something we can take charge of, I think.
Spearhead, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me reach out to the MHP grant people. If they say we're gonna give out awards next week, I'll be like, okay, let's hold off until we get an award, and that will trigger a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. If they're gonna say, oh, we'll get you back to you in like a month or two, I will start working on something to workshop with the select board. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Just so we get something moving and it
does.
Stays in the zeitgeist.
Something you said, Joy, that it's a lot of work. I was worried about that because that's some of the feedback we had heard. But one of the things I recollect is I think we can use CPA funds to pay for admin help. True? Not true? Because it's toward housing?
Not CPA funds, but housing production plan funds, which can come from the CPA. So we can't get that admin help until the housing trust is created. But in creating the housing trust, it's important that you put in there that one of the expenses is going to be an annual administrator fee to our wages or whatever. So then once it's created and once CPA funds have been put into the housing trust, then those funds can be used to pay an administrator.
Okay, appreciate that clarification, Sierra. I couldn't remember the details of it, but I think it's really, really important for this to remain sustainable, because we're a small town of volunteers, and that's where it will fall apart.
And I also want to be clear that like a lot of the hard work is in the beginning, because there's a lot of campaigning. It needs to pass through annual town meeting. It has to be passed by the town. And a lot of it's like the campaigning and getting people on board and the advertising and all of that. So that's why it's hard. It's very different from just like, oh, let's create a committee and ad hoc, like la-di-da. Like it's really crafting something that you convince the townspeople it's good for the town.
I was really hoping for la-di-da.
Me too.
All right. Well, I thank you for your hard work on this. And, I think you're hearing from at least us current board members that we're definitely willing to assist and try to facilitate this, because we realize how important it is. It's really hard to do anything without a trust. We know that.
It's depressing when people are like, oh, you're such a young couple to be living in Southampton, like a young family. And I was like, oh, that makes me like, we're the other young families. What do you mean? They're here, right? So yeah, I'm hoping we can get more young families and keep our elderly folks here in Southampton for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is other items not on the agenda. Did we miss anything? Are there any open issues that folks want to present today, bring forward? I just want to say briefly, I want to thank Chester for joining us. I want to thank Sarah for taking time out to join us. Some really key input. And of course, Ken, thank you. And Joy, as always. You've shown all of you, some real demonstrated commitment to this ideal. And that's really, really important. And it encourages me. Thank you. And Janet, you have your hand raised.
Well, I just want to mention the email we received from Emmanuel.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Not mention that. I did send him the link to this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I did not hear back from him. So he did respond to my original email, and I know you left him a voicemail, Jim, right?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up because I just spoke to him yesterday.
Oh, good.
We spoke on the phone. So he just had some general questions, thinking about future, zoning options in town, and how that fits into affordable housing and commercial development. And so we talked a little bit about that. We talked about, how some towns have a mixed use, for example, overlay district that promotes affordable housing by, promoting commercial development with affordable units on the second floor, for example, as a way to build that housing stock where right now it's not possible. So he appreciated the call. I suspect he'll remain interested in this kind of thing. So it was a good conversation, I felt. It was a good conversation.
Are they the folks that own the property across from the cemetery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good.
I made that assumption, but I don't like to assume, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other thoughts or questions? All right, we'll schedule our next meeting, which I think we did, we're going to meet on the 16th, but are we also going to schedule next month's regular? I think we should.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Which my calendar says the 7th. That's another reason to love February, right? Because March just follows suit unless it's a leap year.
I'm sorry, what time are you going on the 16th?
Also, it's 6 o'clock. That's what I have. Is that right? Confirm that? Yeah.
Okay. I do have a planning board meeting scheduled for 7. Yeah, Sarah, you got that too? Okay.
Boy, I think I attend a lot of meetings. Oy.
Monday the 7th at 6.
March 7th at 6 p.m. Sounds good. All right. I guess I'll accept a motion to adjourn if there's no further business.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, by voice vote of Housing Authority members, all in favor of adjourning.
Simmons, aye.
Kane, aye.
CDI. Perfect.
27. Okay.
All right. Thank you all again. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guests and all. Thank you. Bye.
All right.